Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, RockAuto.com, and State Farm. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 215 in Studio C at MotorWeek World Headquarters. And I'm pleased to be joined today with Road Test producer Ben Davis.
Hey, guys.
No relation. Online content coordinator Greg Carlos.
That's me, although I just realized I'm not online content coordinator
No,
anymore.
you actually have a
moving
different
up in the
title.
world, yeah.
What are you now?
I guess I'm technically the feature reporter. I don't
You
know
are
what's the exact title, but
I would say you're over-the-edge reporter.
That's what it is,
Coming
over the
in
edge.
after Zach.
So edgy.
So congratulations.
that's why I've turned my hat backwards, because I'm now
Congratulations.
the over-the-edge reporter.
Speaking of reporters, who's already well situated in her position, FYI reporter Stephanie Hart joins us today.
Hi, thanks for having
You're
me.
very lovely to be here. It's not often we have Stephanie off the road and in the studio. So let's get to it. And we've actually got one of the things we're going to talk about up top will be a recent segment that Stephanie did. But we're going to start actually with me, the car that is probably the most talked about car of the year so far, the 2020 Chevrolet Corvette, the first rear mid-mounted engine Corvette. Everybody knows the details, 6.2-liter V8, 495 horsepower, 0 to 60 under 3 seconds, with the Z51 package, 8-speed dual-clutch transmission, starting price $60,000. However, I've now had a chance to drive it as part of the North American Car of the Year jury. A couple of weeks ago, I and about 30 or 40 others got to spend time in the car. It was a very controlled drive up in Michigan. We had engineers with us. We weren't on a track, just on the streets, but some very good streets. And my first impression before I open it up, when you get in any mid-engine car and you start it up, the first thing you expect to hear is the engine rumbling away about 6 inches behind your head. And the Corvette, it was as silent as any other well-done passenger car that you can think of. When you're idling, you barely know the engine is running. I was amazed at how quiet the car was, both there and also when you put it in gear and we're doing reasonable driving in their standard drive modes. When you did punch it up to the sport and the track modes, the exhaust wakes up, the engine wakes up, everything wakes up, steering wakes up, and the car sounds like the supercar that it's trying to be. The other thing, and this apparently has sparked a little bit of controversy, what I liked about it is most of the times the old Corvettes, when you got in them, you had lots of hood in front of you and you really didn't know where the front was. And most mid-engine cars that we get a chance to drive, be it from Lamborghini or Ferrari or McLaren, you sit laid back a little bit and you're looking at a bit of sky and you see a little bit of the hood and you also don't really know where the front end is. Well, the Corvette, you don't know where the front end is either, but it slopes away from the driver so quickly that you literally, all you see is the road right below the cowl. And I haven't had that experience since a Di Tommaso Pantera back in the early 70s. Some of the magazines, notably Car and Driver, actually complained about that. They actually felt like that it was worse than a front-engine Corvette. I don't agree. I did think the rear visibility was surprisingly good for a mid-engine car. The cockpit, it's the wraparound with the arm that comes down the center from the instrument panel to the console. That's where all your heating and air conditioning equipment is. I do think the passenger will feel a little left out of everything because the screen is also angled, not sort of angled towards the driver, but it's certainly more in the driver's purview. But plenty of redundant manual switchgear all around, as well as a touchscreen, digital gauges that change depending on what drive mode you're in. The car itself, on the roads we were on, easily could handle everything we had a chance to put it through. The corners were tight and sweeping. It was like it didn't really seem to matter. But the C7 did that as well. So everything that we were able to deduce at that time is that the car is going to live up to its hype. I think it's going to take some real track performance to figure out whether or not it's quite as good as they say. But lightweight feeling, you cannot imagine, having owned a couple of Corvettes and spent a lot of time in them, the difference in steering feel. You get in it, and it's like the lightness of the front end with that big hulking V8 sitting up there is pretty amazing. So the other thing that's amazing is how quickly the price can shoot up. They gave us the Monronis for the cars we were driving, which were well equipped but not over the top, and they weren't 60, they were 90. So if you're going to put anything on it, it's going to go up pretty fast. The car I drove did have the magnetic suspension on it too, which the $60,000 car does not. So with that, and you've read since I got back some of the other reports that have been out about the car. Anybody got any other comments about either what you think or what someone else has said?
Yeah, I mean, before I get into things I've heard, and at least I've had a chance to see the car, you just said that the supercar it's trying to be. I don't know if it was intentional or
it was because.
But my question is is it a supercar? I mean, by all accounts of its performance on paper,
I'd say yes.
In supercar territory,
I'd say it's yes. I'd say, the only thing that separates it from an entry-level supercar is the price. I mean, because these days the least expensive exotic that we get in here is what, $150? Somewhere between $125 and $150, and that's very few of those. So it's easily comparable to anything I can think of under $200,000. Even if you load it up, you're going to be probably about half that price. So, yeah, I did say that on purpose because I think that's their aim. I personally, having driven it as limited as I did, with somebody watching over us, I think it's there. Yeah.
Comparison to, naturally people want to compare it to an NSX, mostly because it's of the styling. But again, we've said it before, it's a mid-engine car. It's going to have similar proportions to other mid-engine cars. You can't get away from that. But the NSX was really built as the supercar for the street. So is this – it sounds to me like you're saying –
This is more of a I put the NSX in a little bit of a special category. To me, it's an extraordinarily high-tech supercar, which quickly is probably being eclipsed by some of the newer efforts. So when I drive an NSX, I think it is a supercar. It's got the performance and the handling, but it also is a car where you feel like the computers are driving it somewhat more than you do. I did not feel like the computers were intervening in the limited time that I had in the Corvette. So I felt like it was a little more of a performance-oriented supercar rather than just a technology-oriented supercar like I think the NSX is. So they're comparable, certainly, in a lot of ways, especially acceleration and handling. But I think dare I say, I think the Corvette maybe is a little bit more of a driver's car.
But I'm sure they'd like to hear that. It's probably the way it should be. I mean,
that's not taking anything away from the NSX. I think it's an impressive vehicle.
Right, considering they're sticking with it's still a pushrod V8 midship. I mean, it has to have some of that raw American sound to it and
when
all
you
that good stuff.
Flip up the drive modes properly, it sounds like you're cruising on a Saturday night with glass packs.
Glass packs, yeah.
Anybody else? Well, it's going to be a while before we get a chance to actually put a Corvette through its paces, but I think everybody on the staff is looking forward to it. It certainly is the most talked about car of the year. However, I will say at this event, the other performance car that was awfully impressive, and we've almost forgotten it because we tested it so long ago, was the Supra.
Oh, yeah.
It is an amazing automobile for its price.
Yeah, that one gets lost in the argument of it being a Z4, and I can't even say that it definitely feels like a BMW inside. But I mean, you got to drive this thing. That should not count against how good of a car it is to drive, because it is really a good car to drive.
I actually hammered it around some of the corners, and we use roads sort of west of Detroit that are quite sweeping. I was up at speed at that car, I think even a little bit more than the Corvette because I was by myself. Very impressed with the Supra. So it should not be overlooked. It's certainly been a highlight of the new vehicles this year. Speaking of vehicles, speaking of loading vehicles, Stephanie Hart, you just had an experience that an awful lot of people would like to take. And you've one of your upcoming FYI segments. Tell us about what you just came back from.
Well, we took the auto train from Lorton, Virginia to Sanford, Florida. We loaded on one of our MotorWeek long-term cars, the Mitsubishi Outlander, and we experienced that 14-hour auto train trip from Virginia to Florida.
And that's something an awful lot of folks do on the East Coast, especially during the wintertime.
Yeah, it's extremely popular with snowbirds. There were also families on the train, too, a bunch of kids as well that we interviewed. So it was a good experience overall. There's a lot of pros. There's a lot of cons.
Tell us about a lot of people are wondering about how much trouble it is to get on the train, to have them take your car. Are you worried about your car? Did you have any inhibitions, or did it go smoothly, or what?
Yeah, it was a pretty smooth process. You have to check in by 2:30, and then the train leaves around 4. But if everyone's checked in early, the train can leave as early as 3:30. So the train we were on, I believe, left around like 3:45.
And you, luckily, were in one of the full bedrooms, I guess.
We were in the sleeper car.
Are they upstairs or downstairs? Or?
They could have been downstairs or upstairs. My room was upstairs. I had sort of a mid-level sleeper room, so I wasn't the VIP sleeper. I was sort of middle of the road, and then a lower level would be just a regular coach seat. So the sleeper I was in had a bunk bed and then a bottom bed. So it was set up like bunk beds.
So for 2 people or a small family or whatever?
It could fit 2 people, but I mean, it's extremely tight. It's very small in there, and there is no bathroom in there. There's no shower in there. You have to use the public facilities in the train.
What was the most? Give us the high point, and one high point and maybe one low point of the trip.
The high point was definitely the food quality. Dinner was delicious. One night I had salmon. That was very good. The other night I had a steak.
Because you came back.
Right. We did the round trip. And then they had dessert. I had a chocolate caramel lava cake, and they put whipped cream right on it. It sort of felt like a cruise or something.
Right.
Yeah. So the food was really good. So even though you were trapped in small quarters, the food really did make up for it. And then one of the downsides, when I was sleeping in my room, there were points in the trip where the tracks were uneven or it was a rough surface.
Yeah.
So it did wake me up.
Good old East Coast railroad tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tracks, and for those people that don't live on the East Coast, I should know that all of the tracks out here are actually owned by the freight lines and not Amtrak. So they tend to be just fine when they're carrying grain, but not so good when they're carrying people. Would you do it again?
I would do it again if I was a snowbird or staying in Florida for a long period of time. I think for just a quick weekend trip, it possibly wouldn't work because you aren't able to make up your sleep. I mean, quite honestly, the first night I took it, I only slept about 4 hours. So I wasn't really able to catch up on my sleep.
I gathered everybody was very cordial on the train, and you met a lot of other people, I assume.
One of the best parts, the camaraderie between the passengers. All the passengers were so friendly, and I really enjoyed chatting with everyone and hearing their stories during dinner and just sort of in the lounge car. A lot of people playing games and listening to music, watching movies. So I really loved the passengers on the train, both going there and coming back. So that was great.
Getting your car off, did it take a long time?
No, not really. No, they told me the most we'd have to wait would be maybe an hour, hour and 20.
That's not too bad.
So I think we waited maybe a half hour. It was a quick process.
Sounds like a fun trip.
Yeah,
Can't
it
wait
was.
to see the video.
Oh, yeah. So, John, that story is airing nationally November 22nd.
There
the
you
story
go.
on the auto train.
You heard it from here first. Thanks, Stephanie.
Sure.
We're going to move on now to our lightning round, where we've each got sort of a 30-second window to give our comments on a trending automotive topic. Now, as we are recording this, and yes, it is not live, just in case you thought it might be, General Motors and the United Auto Workers have reached a tentative agreement that would end the longest GM strike since 1970, actually the longest automotive strike. The strike began on September 16th, and since then, Bank of America analysts have estimated GM has lost more than $2 billion. On top of that, production of the new Corvette could be delayed. How big a role do you think the Corvette played in negotiations, and will it have any effect on C8 sales or availability? Anybody have an opinion?
That is a tasty question.
Yeah.
Take a bite out of it, Benny.
We haven't heard from you much this podcast.
Well, I mean, I heard that question and I wanted to know the answer myself. I could only speculate that the C8 Corvette had a great deal to do with settlement negotiations. But
I think you're probably. I think it had a factor.
I'm looking forward to a smarter guy like you to tell me actually what's going on here.
Well, I mean, is it naive to think that it was just a coincidence or poor timing on GM's part to have this negotiation?
Well, it's not their choice. The
UAW
picks its strike
and
target.
it was the UAW's thought in mind to say, hey, you got a Corvette coming out.
And GM is the most profitable domestic automaker. They went where the money was.
Yeah, so I guess to answer that question, it had an effect. I mean, there was obvious reasons on the behalf of the UAW. Will it affect sales? I mean, maybe if it does end up pushing back the production, which it very well could.
Probably did push it back a little bit.
Maybe a little bit, but if you want one, you're going to wait for it anyway.
I personally think that while the Corvette could possibly have had an impact, because after all, you're launching this vehicle and you want to launch it at a good time. You don't want to be delayed, and you don't want the dealers and the people who have already put down money to be complaining about it not being delivered. You also have to look at their broader portfolio. Where do they make all that money that the UAW wants to slice up? They make it on pickup trucks. And right now, they're already hurting from the fact that they've lost the second-place role to Ram, which they claim they're going to get back with the new HD and once Ram stops making the carryover classic model. I think pushing the Silverado sales back is where they really lost their money, and I think that's the cash cow that they were afraid of damaging most. The early reports make it sound like that the union got some of what they wanted. It sounds like that, GM will probably end up getting some of what they wanted, but it clearly was a strike that was not just hurting GM, but it was hurting the national economy as a whole. You look like you wanted to say something. But did you, Stephanie, you were a general assignment reporter before you met us. So if you had been out and about, what do you think people would have thought about how long the strike went on, if I can ask you to kind of guess at that?
I don't know. In terms of production, though, I think it's sort of too early to speculate if it's going to delay production.
They'll probably make that back.
Yeah, probably, but maybe customers will get a little frustrated. It may damage sort of the brand identity in a small way.
And it could evoke images of maybe if the UAW members are not really happy, maybe the vehicles won't come off the line quite like they should. I mean, who knows? Mm-hmm. I'm glad they've settled it. I think it's good for the country, and I think it's good that the politicians kind of got a little bit involved to kind of spur this along. Glad it's over with.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned, it was a long one. Longest since 1970.
Parts for repairs were a big problem. A lot of current owners were sitting there saying, I can't get my car fixed.
It'd be nice if the UAW came at GM and was like, all right, part of the deal is you have to stop airing those commercials with that smug guy.
You mean the Chevy commercials?
Yeah, the Chevy commercials where they're like, whoa, I've never seen a car before. That's a Chevy?
What did somebody label them? You just wonder, are those people actors at all?
No, but it says not actors, John.
It says not actors.
So, and everything is true.
But I've read a couple places people have been charging them that they're kind of faux in what they're kind of doing. But
I'm sure they'd have to have a SAG card to be in a national commercial, right?
All right, let's move on. Stephanie, hit the bell. All right, now our viewer question. This is from Marcus. I've noticed that more and more cars that you test on MotorWeek are starting to offer a rear view camera, and what they're talking about is the rear view mirror, I assume, that looks out the back while driving forward.
Fantastic.
Taking the place of the traditional rear view mirror. Yes, there you go, Marcus. What are your thoughts on these? Will they replace mirrors in the future? What's your thoughts?
I have a lot to say on this because I was a very early adopter, only because at the same time I was transitioning into bifocals, which if you've ever done that, or you will eventually probably, it takes a while to get used to it. My eye doctor kept saying, hey, it's all in your head. It's electrical connection in the brain. Just give it a couple of weeks. It'll be fine. So I'm thinking the same thing with this rearview mirror. And sure enough, day 3, I couldn't live without it. But right away, I tried it. I had some depth perception issues with it right away. But just muscle through it. You'll get used to it. And even as their changes are being made to them versus the one I tried, now you can adjust the angle of the camera a little bit and get the optimal angle and that helps get used to it quicker. But I don't care who you are. It's going to be weird the first time you do it. And it's going to be weird for a couple of days. But soon after, you're going to love it.
Yeah, I don't have your willpower. I can't get through that initial. I don't know if it's the lack of visual cues of seeing maybe
no
headrest
there. That got me.
Or if it's
really
an actual
did.
Visual thing that it makes my eyes, like I can't focus on anything. So my question to you is, why is it? For the reason I just said, is it because you don't have any obstructions? Does that make it better for you, or the fact that you don't have to worry about adjusting it all the time?
I'd say the obstructions are huge, especially in SUVs.
You don't have a back window that limits you left and right.
Headrests are so big and D pillars are so wide. Exactly. I just like to see multiple lanes without, quick look at that, quick look at my sides, and I'm good.
Would you prefer a mirror at night? Or is the camera? Because I know the ones that I've used, it gets a little bit worse at night just because of the way cameras inherently act with low light.
You know what drives me crazy, which drives in television production, it drives us crazy equally as well. The LED lights. If you don't get the shutter just right, you get that flicker effect.
Right.
And I found that you get that in the rearview camera as well. But I had no problems with it at night, but I have general problems at night with mirrors anyway, and this was just as bad as any other mirror I'd ever looked at to me at nighttime.
Stephanie, anything to add?
I tried them once or twice. I didn't really like them at first. I got confused, and it was hard to look at. And I felt less confident driving the vehicle with that. But possibly if I kept driving a vehicle that had that technology, I might get used to it. I don't know. But the first couple of times, I really didn't feel confident behind the wheel using that.
I agree with you. Now, mind you, my time is relatively limited in cars that have it, and then they go away. Then you get something else that's got it, and you've got to start all over again. I found, and I have bifocals, that I had problems seeing as sharp in the images as sharp in the mirror as I did in the camera mirror, as they did just in the mirror. But it is the future. I mean, they're going to pretty much do away with outside mirrors, inside mirrors, and everything's going to be on a monitor. So this is the future. Marcus, that was answering your other question.
Something real fast about the nighttime thing. If it was a night vision camera type situation where it's just high contrast, like light grays and blacks, then I would drive all the time just to have that. That would be the night. That would make it the nighttime for me. And it's the quick glance that throws you off the most. Once you can look at it
you're right.
and adapt to it, then you're good to go.
And it is all in your head.
Maybe they just need to tweak the software so the software is clearer and easier for us to sort of decipher through.
I think it would be really weird to be in a minivan with a mirror like that and look back and not see the kids in the back seat.
I think so. Yeah,
maybe
that would
one of those
be
little conversation
very weird.
mirrors.
Yeah, that's what you could have just another camera
Yeah.
you could just switch to.
Or you just flick it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, thanks everybody. Anyone got a rant or a rave that they want to throw out there for this show? And the silence drops all around the table. Nobody particularly bothering you on the
rant or a
roads?
rave. Do you have something? It sounded like you were going to say something.
No. I was just going to make one up because everybody else was just not doing it.
No dead air here, please.
I haven't seen the fall collector car shows like Hershey and Carlisle and such, and seeing auction results. It's not a rant nor a rave, but just an observation that the older collector cars like Model Ts and stuff, nobody wants them anymore.
I've heard that too.
Everybody that wants them is dead. So those cars are just either
sad?
going
Why?
It's really sad.
they're going to carry on with inherited people, or they're just going to get nobody wants them.
You're somebody who, if you had the means, would probably collect a few cars. I mean, you wouldn't want one if you had the money?
No, I wouldn't want one either.
And that's who's buying cars right now, right? Or at least going to auctions. I mean, probably a little older than you still, but your demographic is like really starting to hit the scene now.
Because if you worked anywhere else, you might have enough money to do it.
But I would want a C4 Corvette, and nobody wants to pay any money for those either.
Really?
I think now's the time to grab those.
Now's the good time to grab that.
Yeah, but I've had, and we've definitely seen that. We've talked about it, but I've talked to other journalists who just like, and I've actually never driven a C4. I'd love to if somebody wants to offer theirs up to me. But there's a lot of journalists who just are always just really talking poorly about C4s, and it's starting to sour my opinion, even though I've never driven one.
Back in the day, I mean, they rattled and they squeaked, and the body panels didn't fit very well.
But just to look at,
but
I like the way
the car was great to look at, and if you really look back at how the car performed, it performed pretty darn well. So, I wonder if they. Hindsight's tough because
it's about
cars today are so good compared to what they were.
It's about like a GT-R. This guy, Nissan.
We've said that before, that a lot of people make a lot of excuses for the GT-R, and it makes a lot more noises and creaks and rattles than an old Corvette.
And it doesn't smell like gas either.
Oh, man.
All right.
It's supposed to.
We're groping here, so we're going to basically wrap this up. Thanks very much to our audio engineer, Jim Bigwood, our podcast producer, Greg Carlos, our podcast creator, Bob Mixter, and to Ben, Greg, and Stephanie sitting at the table. See, Greg, you get 2 hits every show.
Yeah, every time.
To all of you out there, thanks very much for being a part of our MotorWeek family and watching us on public television stations around the country and also on the Motor Trend cable network. If you can't find us, that means you're not trying very hard, but you can go on over to YouTube /MotorWeek. We've got hundreds and hundreds of our road tests and other features all sitting there on YouTube. Till next time, I'm John Davis. For all of us at MotorWeek, thanks for being a part of our MotorWeek family.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, RockAuto.com, and State Farm. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series, each week on your local PBS station.